Hi, and welcome to this video. Now, any business English course needs to prepare you for working and what you'll be doing in your future business life and in your career. And of course, one of the things we need to look at then is managing and how people manage and how people manage people. So in this video, what we're going to be doing is looking at performance management. And what we'll be doing is looking at performance management, and we'll be looking at all the key concepts. We'll be looking at how performance management works, and we'll be looking at the vocabulary that you need in order to be able to talk about performance management, to discuss performance management in your business English course, and also to answer any question in any exam or assessment that you have. So we come to the first question, and the first question is simply, what is performance management? Well, performance management is a process, and it's a process of evaluation. And the two adjectives that we can use to describe this process are continuous and flexible. And then we need to look at the different stages of this process. And the first stage is simply its planning. And the planning goes on between the manager and the employee. And the manager and the employee together, they set objectives for the employee. Now, these objectives should be what we call aligned to the business. So align, they're put in the correct relative position to the business. And the things that when the manager and the employee align these objectives, the things they should think about is the business itself and the objectives of the business, the mission and the vision of the business, the culture and the values. So after the planning then, we'll come to a stage that's to do with monitoring. So the employee has the objectives, goes out to work and sets out to achieve these objectives. And during the monitoring, then it can be assessed whether the employee is actually on track to meet the objectives that have been set. Now, it could be here that there are very good reasons why the employee is not achieving the objectives, and the objectives can be assessed and reassessed. And then we come to a stage of review. And reviews happen at very regular periods. It could be on a quarterly basis, but normally in companies, they do a review every year. Now, in the review, there will be a review of different aspects. And the first one will be to do with the objectives themselves and the outcomes. And it will be reviewed whether the objectives were met and why they were met and why they weren't met. Then there'll be a review of the employee's progress, the employee's behaviour and the employee's performance and the employee's attitudes. There could also be a review of feedback from different sources. There could be also a review of the skills that the employee needs and the knowledge and the skills they need to achieve certain objectives, or they needed to achieve the objectives in the past. And then, as we said before, it's a continuous process, and then new objectives are set and the cycle begins once again. So we come on to the next question, and the next question is, what are the tools, the business tools that are used for performance management? Now here there are a number of tools that you can discuss and talk about. Now it will depend on the organisation which tools are used, and it will depend on the organisation how the tool is used. But let's look briefly at some tools, and the first one I would like to look at is what is called a performance appraisal. Now, on the performance appraisal, there'll be some kind of assessment of the quantity and the quality of the work of the employee. There could be some items about the personality of the employee, for example, the adaptability and the flexibility of the employee. And there could be an assessment of the employee's communication skills. And lastly but not least, the employee's organisational and management skills. Now, in conjunction with the performance appraisal, there could be some kind of self-evaluation from the employee themselves. Feedback or different kinds of feedback are also used as tools in performance management. An example here might be 360-degree feedback, where the organisation gets feedback from everybody around you. So this could be the peers, your peers, the people working with you on the same level. It could be your supervisor, it could be your manager, it could be your boss, it could even be your customers and your suppliers. Feedback simply helps employees to understand their strengths and their weaknesses, and 360-degree feedback, for example, helps you to see the strengths and weaknesses from all different perspectives. Another thing that might be used is some kind of skills appraisal. So this will be assessing the skills and the knowledge that the employee has. And then once the skills appraisal has been made, there might be some kind of development plan where the employee and the manager agree on some kind of action plan or a list of activities that should be undertaken so that the employee has the right knowledge and skills in order to achieve future objectives. These are some tools that you could talk about. Now, the next question will be to do with the advantages or the benefits of performance management, or why companies perform or they conduct performance management. And here I'd like to give you 12 points. So let's go through these. The first is, performance management provides a framework to measure performance. It provides documentation for the company or the organisation. It gives everybody involved a defined structure. It clarifies expectations of your manager, of the company, of the organisation. It facilitates any support that the employee needs. Setting objectives and meeting objectives will increase employee motivation and engagement. The structure, the process helps managers to manage. It improves the overall performance of the company. It reduces staff turnover, so people just taking the job for a few months and leaving and having to get new staff in. As a result of that, performance management can decrease costs. It can improve employer branding. And performance management can also give a basis to make other decisions, such as giving people pay rises, or giving them a promotion, or deciding on some kind of job rotation within the organisation. So as we've seen here, then there are a number of benefits for an organisation with performance management. But the next question might be then, well, are there any disadvantages? And there are some disadvantages that you can discuss. So the first criticism that's sometimes made of performance management is that it's time-consuming and it's bureaucratic. It can also be with performance management that sometimes people feel there is far too much emphasis on past behaviour and past performance rather than talking about the future performance and future objectives. A lot can also depend on the manager who is conducting the performance management. It can depend on the training they've had and the skills that they now have. So if the manager has simply poor communication skills, or poor management skills and organisational skills, or poor coaching skills, then it can be that performance management is not very successful. Performance management can be criticised as well, simply because it's too subjective. So managers will give opinions and will review performance based on subjective opinions rather than objective evidence. This is sometimes called bias. Now, it's important as well to realise that bias can be conscious and it can be unconscious. And it could be, for example, that the manager, he or she, makes decisions simply on the basis of whether they like the person or they don't like the person. A final disadvantage of performance management that I'd like to outline here is the fact that performance management sometimes is seen to fail because the phases between the planning and the review. So all the monitoring and the assessment and the reassessment, the talking between the manager and the employee is simply not done often enough. Let's move on to the next question. And the next question is to do with your English and how would you describe successful performance management? Well, let me give you a list of adjectives here that you can use. Successful performance management is fair. It's accurate. As we've seen, it's continuous. It's efficient. It's flexible. It's dynamic. It's focused and it's aligned. Go through those again. Fair, accurate, continuous, efficient, flexible, focused, aligned, dynamic. This should give you enough adjectives in order to be able to describe successful performance management. Okay, so let's come along to the final question. And one of the disadvantages that we mentioned that can be thrown at performance management is that the manager lacks management skills. Now let's look at some of the management skills then that a good manager will need in conducting performance management. And the first area we should probably look at is communication skills. There's a lot involved here. In order to be able to conduct the dialogues that the manager needs to conduct, so there's a lot of one-to-one meetings and there's a lot of one-to-one discussions. The manager simply needs to be a good communicator. And a good communicator is able to listen and to listen actively. The manager should be able to ask the right question at the right time. In communication, the manager shouldn't keep talking and talking and talking and filling in the silences. There's a lot of feedback and review involved in performance management. And the manager needs to be able to allow the employees to have time in order to self-reflect and think about the things that have been said and the feedback that they're getting. And silence, the ability to have silences and to give the room and the space to the employees is a really important skill. The manager needs to be able to clarify. So when something's not clear, they need to be able to explain things and to put things into terms that the employee understands. And last but not least, and one of the reasons we're doing this video, is the aspect of English. These days, if you're going to be working in an international workforce, then these appraisal interviews and these review sessions and these monitoring sessions will probably be conducted in English. And the manager needs not only to have these communication skills, but be able to have these communication skills in using English and using English as a global language. Another management skill then is, if we move on from communication skills then, is to talk about emotional intelligence. Now the manager needs to be able to conduct really open and honest interviews and conversations. The manager needs to be able to recognize people, to praise people when this is really necessary. They need the ability not simply to just say nice things, but be able to give really constructive comments and feedback to the employee. They need to be generous. They need to be able to celebrate success when it's there with their employees. And sometimes they need to just simply be able to express appreciation and just say thank you to employees for the work that they've done. If we move on then from communication skills and management skills, then coaching skills are also very desirable for a manager so that they can give, again, constructive feedback to their employees and to help their employees along the right path and to achieve the goals that have been set. And last but not least, a manager needs to be able to manage, and a manager needs management skills. A manager needs to be organized, a manager needs to be systematic, a manager needs to be objective when it's necessary, And this means they need to be able to focus on the evidence that's there and to support their arguments with the evidence. So that was it. What we've looked at in this video then is performance management. And what I've tried to do here is give you the concepts and the vocabulary that you need in order to be able to discuss and to write about performance management. And we've gone through a number of questions. The first was simply to do with what is performance management. Then we went on to talk about some of the tools that can be used in applying performance management. Then we talked about a good number of advantages of performance management. Then some of the disadvantages if you need to outline those. And then we used some adjectives that you could use to describe good performance management. And finally, we looked at some of the management skills that are required in order to be able to conduct and apply performance management. So once again, I'd like to thank you for listening to this video. Please like, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.